And I'm going to stop there, but you can imagine that basically that prophecy that the Lord gave became so true. So we start, firstly, with Jeroboam and Jehoshaphat. And they are two people who are ruling separately, one Judah and one of Israel. Israel at this moment in time is divided. And Jeroboam, just to give it a little bit of background there, his dad is Ahab and his mum is Jezebel. And it says in the Bible, they did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And then in verses 1 to 4 of that chapter, it actually goes on to say how Jeroboam as well did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He wasn't a great king. Jehoshaphat, on the other hand, is known as a really righteous man. He does good in the eyes of the Lord. He's a good leader. He also has previous experience in battle, and he's quite a strategic leader, whereas Jeroboam doesn't have that experience in battle. And so we have two kings. They have different ways of ruling, and they are ruling different people. And yet Jeroboam comes into a bit of bother when Moab stops paying his tax, basically. He's meant to be owing these 100,000 sheep and these 100,000 ram wolves, but he stops paying that. And so Jeroboam is a little bit of bother. So he goes to Jehoshaphat. And I love Jehoshaphat's response. Because Jehoshaphat could have stood there and he could have gone, actually, the way you rule is not the way I rule. The way you've done things are not good in the eyes of the Lord. What you don't do, I don't like. I don't want to associate with you. I don't want to associate my people with your people. I don't want you using my resources. And in actual fact, Jehoshaphat could have said anything along those lines, but he didn't. His answer is that of absolute humility and of absolute unity. He says, my people are your people. I am as you are. My horses are your horses. And so therefore, Jehoshaphat is recognizing here, hang on, we are the people who should be together. We are the people who should be unified. We are the people who should be one. And actually Moab, he's the enemy. And I just wonder, blood test time, if sometimes in church we forget who the enemy is. We forget that actually it says in the Bible that we are fighting powers and principalities. That actually everything of evil out there in the world, the cruelty, the unkindness, the hatred, everything that is against God, that is what we are fighting. And yet I wonder whether when we're being brought together, we actually fight one another a little bit too much than what we should be fighting. I've put down here, remember who you are. Unite with your brothers. Stuart said, love one another. And yet, it comes to that time where we have to look at what we have been like over the last few months. And maybe it's when we've joined together, we have said lines that Jehoshaphat could have said. Actually, I don't really want to associate with that. I don't want to be part of that. I don't like the way you do that. I don't like the way, Peter, you lead worship. Yeah, I don't like the way, Marcus, you give announcements. Yeah, Joe. Man, there's so much I could say about Joe. Great opportunity. Joe, I don't like the way you comb your hair. I don't like the way you wear what you wear. I could rhyme it as well, Joe. But no. But there's so much we could say, and maybe we've been going, I don't want to go to that because I don't like such and such. I don't like the way they said this. I don't like the way they phrased that. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. Guys, I am as you are. Our people are your people. Our horses are your horses. Our resources that we've got should be one. We should be one. Our leaders should be one. We should be so in utter humility and unity coming together. We shouldn't be fighting what's in here. We should be fighting what's out there. Yeah, that's the first thing that this story tells me. The second thing is they then joined together. Oh, just a side note, sorry. I love this a little bit about Jehoshaphat. I can learn a lot from this guy. Because Jehoshaphat has all the experience in battle. Yeah, he's the one who's strategic. Jehoram, I say this word wrong all the time. I'm sorry. Sorry for that. But Jehoram, he hasn't got the experience. And yet Jehoshaphat asks him, which way should we go? Which way should we go? Isn't that just a little beautiful moment in Scripture where Jehoshaphat has the experience? Jehoshaphat has the background in battle. He knows Jehoram doesn't. But he goes in utter humility, go on, you decide what do you want us to do? That's so beautiful. And maybe we can learn something from that, that when we're talking with one another, you might think, I've got all the experience in this. I've got all the experience in preaching. I've got all the experience in worship, or I've got all the experience in prayer. But just take a moment to learn, like, such a beautiful response from Jehoshaphat, going, actually, what do you want to do? Such a beautiful little moment. Anyway, sorry, my second point is they join together. They're one in this unity. They go out to the desert and they've been marching around for 7 days and they find themselves without any water, without any food, and they're stuck there. And Jehoram's instant response is, great. Moab is going to slaughter us. His first response is one which is critical, it's one of panic, and it fears the worst. And Jehoshaphat, though, on the other hand, goes, hang on, let's inquire of the Lord. There must be someone here who we can inquire of the Lord. And maybe third month into one church, you're looking around and thinking, this doesn't look great. This isn't how I imagined it to be. We were meant to join as one and there was meant to be this great blessing. Where's that? And maybe you're feeling that you're kind of in a bit of a desert. You don't know where you belong. You feel unconnected. Maybe you feel a bit alone. Maybe you feel that actually it doesn't look as fruitful as what it did before. And yet I'll just urge you, don't respond with criticism. Don't respond with panic. Don't assume the worst. But just go and inquire of the Lord. And maybe this point for you has nothing to do with one church. Maybe now I'm speaking to individuals where you made a decision in boldness. Maybe you made a decision to follow Christ. Maybe you're sat here this morning, you're a new Christian. Maybe God called you to leave your job or start a new job. Maybe God called you to get married or to start a family. Maybe God has put you in a place where you haven't been before and you're sat here this morning, you're thinking, Lord, this doesn't look great. I feel thirsty and I feel hungry and I feel alone. And I feel that maybe there's this message for you this morning which says, don't be critical. Don't assume the worst. But just go and inquire of the Lord. And maybe you're in a place where you personally feel that you can't go and inquire of the Lord. Jehoshaphat, who was this amazing leader, didn't do it personally. He went and found Elisha. And so maybe there's someone here this morning that you need to go to and go, look, I feel like I'm not in a great place right now. I feel like I'm not in a fruitful place. Can you just ask God what's happening for me? Maybe some of you here this morning, that's what you need to do. And then my third point, and this is my kind of biggest point. So if you've kind of fallen asleep, wake up now, wake up. Then comes this amazing prophecy, okay, which the Lord says, make the valley full of ditches. Make this valley full of ditches. And then he says, and then I will pour water into it. And the first thing is that I love this idea that you've got all these soldiers and kings in a valley and they're tired and hungry, and God says, dig ditches. They must have been thinking, oh, just want some food. But they do. They dig ditches. They remove dirt. And I wonder whether sometimes, blood test time, when God brings us together, there's a little bit of time where we physically have to remove dirt to create capacity. Ready for the blessing of the Lord, ready for increase, we have to look at ourselves individually, and we have to look at the church as well and go, we need to dig out some dirt here. We need to remove some stuff here to create increase. And you know what? That's hard. Digging ditches is hard work. It's routine work. It's mundane work. And it's tough. And maybe, it's tough to be compassionate when we don't feel like it. Maybe you come to one church and you're like, oh, that Beth Boxall, she really winds me up. I don't blame you if you feel like that. I wind me up. But dig that bit of dirt up. Just extend some compassion, even when you don't feel like it. Again, we've heard this morning that we've got to love one another. And maybe you're about to go to a meeting this week and you're thinking quite cynically of the meeting. Well, it's hard work, isn't it, to go into something when you feel cynical but love one another. But God's asking you to dig out that cynicism. Allow that room for love. Maybe dig out a bit of pride and instead replace it. Allow the Lord to increase it with humility, that somebody else's way might be better. And that's hard. That's hard stuff. Particularly if it's things that you've done for years and years or things that you hold dear to. But God brings more victory than we can ever comprehend when we start to dig out and allow for capacity in him. Carol spoke a couple of weeks ago on surrendering things at the cross. And Marcus this morning said this great line, which is let go and let God. And maybe there's things us individually that we haven't yet let go of at the cross. Maybe there's certain things that are kind of churning over in our heads. Maybe there's mistakes in the past that we've held on to. And God's just like, dig that out. Just dig it out. This links, you're thinking, finally, Beth. This links to the verses in Matthew that I was meant to be preaching on, which says, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will be pulled away from the old garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins, for if they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both will be preserved. In both of these verses, in the verses in Matthew and this story here, we've got the creation of a new vessel. We've got creation of the ditches that hold water. We've got the new wineskins that hold new wine. And Andrew, when he spoke this morning, talked about maybe restoration and renewal. That what we've done, his words were, what's gone before, we need to let go of. Because actually maybe the Lord wants to just dig something new. He wants to create something new. Ready for this huge amount of blessing that he's got coming our way. And I want to speak specifically to leaders at this point. So if you're leading children's work or youth work, or you're a helper in youth work or children's work, or the catering team, or the worship band, or the preaching team, or the volunteers who meet and greet out the front, or the carpet, anything. I really feel that God's giving me this little last bit just for you, which is, have you fallen back into doing things in the old ways? Have you fallen back into just using old wineskins when the Lord blatantly wants to pour new wine into something new. And you know, now we're together, we should have created a lot more capacity. We should have those ditches in front of us where the Lord, when he brings blessing, brings so much. But I wonder whether, leaders, already you feel full up. I wonder whether you feel full to the brim already. I wonder whether you do have any capacity. And you know what I think is fantastic about this story is they're in the desert. The troops are hungry. The troops are tired. The troops are thirsty. And yet the kings have an instruction which is dig ditches. And the kings go, let's dig ditches. The kings don't go, let's feed the troops. The kings don't go, let's get water for them. The kings don't go, let's give them rest. The kings go, God's promised that. We need to dig ditches to prepare for the increase. And leaders, what I mean by that is I wonder whether you're rallying round, trying to feed your teams, trying to make sure that they're okay, trying to make sure that they feel happy and confident, trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that they're well rested, that they're at peace with what's going on. When Lord here is like, it's not about that. It's about preparing for the increase that I'm about to deliver. It's about digging ditches. It's actually about everybody having a spade in their hand, looking at their own lives, digging out what's not of God, digging out stuff, because he has promised us an absolute deluge. He promised us when the churches come together. I believe we've heard it since so many times. I believe that God gave me this passage to preach on, and it's because God consistently keeps saying to us, there is about to become a flood in this area. And yet, if we are not working together, digging ditches, then lots of people will come into this church, and do you know what? They'll just go again. Because there will be nothing for them. Because we will be running around too busy to even notice and stop and have a conversation with them. So let go and let God. You know, God fed the soldiers. I'm not saying we neglect one another. I'm not saying that by any means. It's about trusting that God will feed us. It's about recognizing, when you're a leader, it's about recognizing what your role is to do. And your role, I believe, at this moment in time is to create capacity. And let God feed your teams. Let God nurture your teams. You know, God fed the 5,000. The disciples didn't run around manically, did they? Collecting, going to every bakery store they possibly could in Israel to try and feed those people. God just said, hand me what you've got, and he fed them. And I think there's a lot we can learn from that this morning, that actually our job and your job in leadership is to create the capacity for when the floods come. Not just to make sure that everybody's feeling okay. And so I'm going to end soon. The countdown timer's stopped, which means I've got to stop. But I'll just summarize really quickly. The first thing is, we've come together. And sometimes when we come together, it actually highlights dirt that we need to get rid of. Maybe we thought we were quite humble. Maybe we thought we were quite in favour of unity. Maybe we thought we were quite compassionate. And then we've come together and we realised, actually, maybe I need to dig that out of me this morning. Maybe on a personal note, you're looking around and things aren't looking how you thought they looked. You feel tired, you feel hungry, and you're thinking, God, you've led me here, and this isn't a great place to be. And maybe you just need to inquire of the Lord. And then lastly, leaders, I really urge you to focus on, what are you doing that creates capacity? What are you doing which digs those ditches so that when the blessing that we've been promised comes, we've got so much space to allow for it? Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I just have such a sense this morning that God is in this place and that he wants to do some stuff. And we're going to have communion, but I'm going to do lots of things that you're not supposed to do in big church because it's going to get a bit messy now. And but we're going to take communion, but before that and during that, I sense that God is really speaking to us this morning. And he's speaking to us as individuals. He's speaking to us about stuff that is what we need to do. And as a response this morning, I want us to literally walk across the room. If you were part of Living Well Church before, I want you to walk across the room and pray with someone from one church. No, the Ark. Just seeing if you're paying attention. And if you were previously from the Ark, I want you to walk across the room and go and pray with someone that was at Living Well. I think we need to physically move. We need to physically take a step towards our brothers and sisters that maybe didn't come from the same place that we did. It's going to be a bit messy. It'll be okay. It'll be fine. So we're going to do that. The worship team are going to lead us in some worship. Let's do that during this process. Come to the front and receive communion as part of this process. But I really want us to do something physical this morning, that we physically walk across the room and connect with someone else and pray with them. Because if we do that, no power of hell, no scheme of man can stop us if we are one, if we really are one. Stand with me. Lord, I thank you this morning that you have spoken so clearly to us. There is not a shade of doubt, a shadow of doubt about what you're saying to us. That you're asking us to walk across the room. You're asking us to unify with each other. You're asking us to examine our own hearts and love one another. Because when we do that, we are creating the environment in which you can move, and you can move powerfully. So, Lord, I thank you that you brought us to this moment this morning. You brought us to this point of engagement with you this morning, where you've given us some real clarity about how we move forward. Thank you for that, Lord. Lord, help us, each of us, Lord, to deal with the fear or the pride or whatever the thing is that is stopping us moving this morning. Come, Lord Jesus, by your Spirit once again, Lord. I just thank you that from different places we're hearing this idea that there's a wave coming, there's a flood coming. It's coming, and we need to be ready for it. Amen.